Okay. Let's talk about cap rate. Okay. So when we talk about cap rate, what we're going to be doing is looking at where you're going to be focusing. I saw somebody's like living in Los Angeles, like unless you have $8 million, I can't remember, was that Eric or whoever it is, like, do you have $8 million to invest in Los Angeles? Or can you find millions and millions of dollars to invest in storage? Because I do have a student. I have a student that lives in the Los Angeles area and is looking for a storage facility right now. And, you know, everything is going to be like millions and millions of dollars. So what you want to do is you want to learn, if you're living in Los Angeles, you have to learn how to syndicate, right? Syndication is key and that's what I'm saying. Syndication is key in finding and buying property in California. You have to learn. Anybody that's an investor in California, they all know how to syndicate. So hopefully you've learned how to syndicate, okay? Or you can learn how to syndicate. All right. This is what we do as well too. But okay, and then anywhere else. So basically what you want to do is you want to look at the primary market, right? You have to look at your market and figure out where you want to be focusing at. Secondary. And then you have the tertiary market. Primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. Okay. So when I say primary, that's like the metro, that's like the downtown metro areas of like population, bigger city populations. Okay. So that's like, I live in Atlanta, so it'd be like inside the perimeter of Atlanta, right? That's like a primary market. Nashville, the downtown, Orlando, driving around Orlando, right? So those primary markets, like, you know, the downtown areas. Okay. So wherever you live, you have to think, am I in a primary market? All right. And then you have also secondary, be like suburbs, the suburbs of the primary markets. All right. So that's like, you know, and it really depends on where you're at. So if you live in like Mobile, Alabama, right, that primary market is not going to be that big, right? You're going to have a primary market, but you're also going to have like a bigger secondary market. Now, if you live, for instance, like Orlando, like I drove around Orlando, I mean, that's a big area and there's a lot of really kind of upscale, there's a lot of like money basically in that area, right? Now, there's a lot of areas that like are kind of dead, you know, as well too. So you want to just focus on like, is it a primary or a secondary market? Okay. And I feel like I'm going to sneeze, so I may sneeze at any time. And then the tertiary markets, like in the middle, it's like no man's land, right? Tertiary markets are no man's land. This is like country. Okay. So we're in Florida, we're driving around and like in between Orlando and like Vero Beach or Cocoa Beach, because we went to the beach and drove up and down that. And there's like a little kind of area right there that's like developing, but not quite developed. There was like a storage facility owner. It was Rockers Lockers. Does anybody live in this area? I just want to know. Rockers Lockers. This guy, he got it down. He got it down, right? You know, he probably built his very first storage facility, maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. And he's got like, maybe he's probably got the same amount of facilities that we have, like 10 facilities. And they're all right in that little tiny strip between like Orlando and like Cocoa Beach, Vero Beach. It's like that no man's land area. But guess what? That no man's land, it's like that's all going to be joining. It's like growing so fast. It's like so much new construction right there. So he really bought in a very good place years ago. He's held on to those facilities and he's now created this like kind of portfolio right in that area. And, you know, when he sells that portfolio, he can be making some cash on that stuff, right? And so you could check it out. Check out Rockers Lockers, because I drove around all that area looking for facilities. And I was like, this guy has got it down. Okay. That's how you want to be as well too, right? So you want to figure out personally, my opinion, unless you've got gazillions of bazillions of trillions of millions of dollars, which kind of sounds like my daughter when she says numbers, right? 100 billion, 600,000 million, 256 billion gazillion dollars, then you can be in the primary market. Okay. If you don't have a lot of money and you have no idea how to get money at all, depending on where you're located, you're going to be focusing on either secondary and tertiary markets. Okay. Most of the time, us little tiny peoples that are trying to become the rocker locker of the world, right? We're going to be in the tertiary markets. Okay. Unless you have a couple $100,000 to put down, right, on a facility, because you have to put 20% down 80% of the time, right? Because if you show up for my webinar, we'll talk about how you could do some creative deal structuring. But 80% of the time, you have to put 20% down. Okay. So if you don't, whatever that number is in your mind, that 20%, right? If you have 50,000 or 100 or 200 or 500,000 or whatever you can come up to put down, that's the 20% of the number that you can purchase. Okay. And so if you have no money at all or very little money at all, you need to be in a tertiary market. All right. Now, if you know somebody that has money, right? You're like, I know my uncle, he got some money. We're going to partner. We're going to go out there and do a storage facility together, right? Awesome. So you might be able to afford the secondary markets. Now, primary markets, that's just really that's a lot of syndication in the primary markets. That's hedge funds and syndication and crowdfunding. And we have we're in the process of doing a Reg D fund. And that's what we're going to talk about on Thursday, is all the different ways that we can fund self-storage. Okay. Now in the tertiary, now we have primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. All right. So now the question is, what is the cap rate that I should be looking for? All right. So the crap rate. That's so funny. The crap rate this is a crappy rate. That's why I was saying it. The crappy rate is 5 to 7% typically, or so hedge funds will even go lower than that. I'm not sure. I'm going to talk about Scott Crone here today in just a minute. Scott Crone, he's like, every once in a while I'll go for a 4 or whatever, because he does huge big deals, right? And he develops and converts and stuff like this. All right. So 5 to 7%, those typical cap rates in a primary market. Okay. The secondary market would be somewhere maybe a 7 to 9% cap rate, depending on where you're at, a 7 to 9% cap rate. Okay. You'd want and it's kind of overlapping in these two, right? Because sometimes in a more up and built area, it's a 7%, right? So if it's it's a secondary market, but it's let's say Kissimmee, Florida, is it would be a secondary market, but on a very low secondary market. Okay. You could probably get a 7%. You could probably get a 7% cap rate, but not 8. Now, if you go further out, you could probably get an 8% cap rate or higher. Right. Does that make sense to y'all? Does that make sense? And then 9% plus is the tertiary markets. Actually, we'll do 8 to 9. 8 to 9% plus tertiary markets. Okay. Now, when you're buying a mismanaged facility, like me, I buy mismanaged facilities. My cap rates when I buy them are going to be horrible cap rates. You know what I'm saying? Because there's no income. Cap rate is based on the income that is being produced, right? So sometimes I buy properties that are negative 2% cap rate. But if I get them at a really good deal and I know I could double the value or triple it that, and I bring those cap rates up to a 15 cap or whatever, you know what I'm saying? That's a good deal, right? So that's a mismanaged, I mean, that's a mismanaged properties. You will have a negative cap rate on the purchase, and you're looking at the opportunity cost, which would be something like this on the back end. I see Eric is saying, is it a reasonable expectation to believe that one has a greater chance for success by being in a primary market versus a tertiary market? No. Like this, I don't understand why people believe this concept. Right? For me personally, think about it this way. In a primary market, you have $3 million. Okay, let's just say I've got $3 million. I'm going to go into a primary market and I'm going to buy a facility, right? And maybe it's a mismanaged facility, or maybe it's not mismanaged, but there's some value add that I can do. I can add some more buildings. Okay, so now I'm still in this primary market. And let's say that by adding the buildings, right, I'm going to increase the value of that property by $1 million, or maybe $1 million or maybe $2 million, right? So but as long as you have that money to put into the deal, you can increase the value. But most of the time, what I see with primary markets is like, and this is the thing with hedge funds, and you guys tell me if you're wrong, but what I see is that they're going in and buying $3 million or $5 or $10 million facilities, and they're not doubling the value of those facilities. They're not doubling it, right? So they're increasing the value by a certain, and cash, by their cash on cash return, or their yield is like whatever, but like most of the time they're not doubling it. Whereas like in the tertiary markets, you can double that value. You can double the value. All right. Because I do it all the time. I know. And you can even triple the value, because every single one of my facilities is either doubled or tripled in value since I bought them. All right. So my question to you is, and this is my question to anybody really, it's just like, it's a lot of work to learn how to syndicate, and to syndicate like huge big deals, which there's nothing wrong with this at all, because I do this on a regular basis. But if you can, if you just have a little bit of money and you can come up with a couple $100,000 for your first deal and then double that value, what's wrong with that? Right? So for me personally, like getting into the game and trying to get a smaller facility, getting that first deal or a couple deals under your belt, there is nothing wrong with this at all. All right. So yeah, like everybody wants to get in and do the bigger deals, but the truth of the matter is too, is like when you get into those $3 million, $5, $4, $5, $6, $7 million facilities, that is like, essentially that's a business. That's a business. That's a huge business that you're buying, and it's not really an investment. So we steer clear from like super huge, big facilities, because, what we want to do is just kind of like, be able to travel, spend time with our family. Everything is, hands off, but, we still play a part in running the facilities. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, some people's like, I want to get the big stuff. I can make more money if I do the big deals. Yeah, you can make a lot more money, but you also have to do a lot more work. Okay, so this is the cap rate. So what I'm saying is that now that you understand the cap rate, or at least kind of have an idea about how the cap rate works in the self-storage investing world, my question to you is, where would you focus? Are you a primary market where you're going to learn how to come up with fund a lot of money, right? And syndicate or crowdfund, or however you want to come up with the money, or partner, however you want to come up with the money. That's number one. Number two, no, I'm a secondary market. I know I can come up with a couple $100,000 to put down, either myself, or I can partner with somebody else to do that. Right. And then come up with, so for instance, we have a student right now that she's been in my coaching program for about almost a year and a half now. She has her first facility. She's working on her second one right now. And her second one is going to be her first one was like a $300,000 facility. She's like, I'm going to get into the game. I'm going to figure this out. I have no idea what I'm doing. She bought it for like $300,000. It's worth now like $700,000. I mean, it was a great deal. Okay. Now she wants to go a little bit bigger. So she's looking for something that's like $1 million, and she has a couple $100,000 herself saved up. So she's going to use her own money for the down payment. Right. And that's kind of how it works. And she's going to, and the thing is that between like the 500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000 mark, depending on where you live, of course, in your Los Angeles, this is very difficult to find a deal like this. But like most of the other world outside of the super like New York or Los Angeles, like California, you can like from like the 500, 600,000 to like the 1.5 million is a very good sweet spot to be in. You can find a lot of mismanaged facilities or income producing properties. And just as long as you can come up with that down payment, you can get an SBA loan, or you can go to the bank and get like a local bank loan pretty easy. And a lot of people do not, just like Eric is sitting here and asking me about primary, is it better for primary? A lot of people really miss out on that, like 500 to 1.5 million dollar facilities in the secondary market. Most people are like, shit, I have no money, I'm going to stay in the tertiary market. And that's how I was for a long time. I was like, I only can come up with so much money, so I'm going to just stay in the tertiary market. But the truth of the matter is, if you can come up with some money to put down, right now is the best time to look at the sweet spot prices. The sweet spot is like 6, 7, 800,000 to like a 1.5 to 2 million, just depending on kind of where you live in the areas across the country. Okay, so my question to you is, what are you? Are you a primary, a secondary, or tertiary market kind of person? And there is nothing wrong with any of them. I'm in all three. All right. So, I'm in all three. I started in the tertiary, I went to secondary, and now I'm in primary. All right. So there's nothing wrong with any of these. So tell me in the chat, which ones do you relate to? Which ones are you you can look at, you can afford of all these three markets? All right. While we're doing that, I'm going to answer some questions. I saw a couple here. I want to make sure I didn't miss them. And actually, and so as whoever asked was like, yeah, so what, is there a greater chance of success in the primary versus the tertiary? No, I'm very, very, very successful in investing in self-storage, and we focus on mostly secondary and tertiary markets. And we're getting in now into the primary because we've been doing this for 5 years and we feel comfortable enough to move into the bigger deals. All right, so that's kind of how it is. So yes, you can be very successful in the smaller areas. All right, do not disregard those at all. What exactly do you do in order to value add mismanaged properties? Do you complete updates, repaving the streets, turning units, climate control? Just really depends on the facility and the units and the location and what the market calls for in that area. But the answer to your question is all of the above, depending on where you're located and what the market calls for. All right, so you may be in the middle of the country where just like throwing up some like metal, fabricated units is like what's needed, or you may be like in a suburbia area where it's like, oh my gosh, all the competition is like all paving their areas and has like a nice fence. So I have to do that as well. So really, just calls on where it's located. Okay.